Cheers and welcome, this is Sugi Strategy, and today we will be doing a bit of a throwback review back in 2013 when Total War Rome 2 came out, and this is a review out of the Emperor edition essentially. And I've been a big fan of the Total War series. The first one I ever played was Medieval 2, and to this day that is my favorite. And then came the Empire. Didn't like that too much, and because they changed a lot of the things, they changed the graphics. I think and the time period was very into my dislike. And Shogun 2 was actually really good too. Maybe we'll be making a review out of that later. And then came the Total War Arena, decent, kind of meh at the same time. And then you have the more recent ones like Attila and Warhammer, which I will be doing reviews out of soon. But I decided to play Rome 2 because I never completed the Grand Campaign. So this review will be, of course, making a lot of references to older games, and I won't be explaining too much about how the game works for people who haven't played Total War games, but just a quick rundown. It's kind of like a strategy hybrid game in terms of you have the actual map, which is based on, in this Rome 2, it's based on Europe and also a large portion of Middle East too and North Africa. And you have different castles and settlements in this specific map, and you can move around with units and you can capture the other castles. And then there is a different screen for the actual battles, so there's kind of like two different engines, so to speak, two different type of things. But you don't have to actually go into the real battles. You can actually go auto resolve all the fights, and the computer kind of tells you will you win or not. So it would be very exhausting to actually play every possible fight. However, I think it's a good blend of two elements, which makes it very ideal. And you know, it might not be everybody's cup of tea. Some people don't auto resolve everything. I'm kind of like, I play perhaps all the significant games where I think I can turn around when the auto resolve gives me bad rating. But essentially, I want to say this, that on the beginning, the reason why I quit Rome 2 on release was because the release was shit. The game was essentially very glitchy. It was very poorly optimized. It crashed for me multiple times. I think the saves got even corrupted or something. It did still crash on me maybe 2 times as I played through this campaign, through the Grand Campaign in these past couple of days. But I think that was probably my PC performance, perhaps more because I had a lot of programs open on the background. But essentially, you know, for the most part, it is somewhat better optimized than it was on release, but it still requires a pretty good PC depending on how much you want to downgrade the graphics. But it's not really the most optimized game out there, really. So this takes up in the Rome 2 takes place, the Grand Campaign takes place in somewhere around 300 to 250 BC. I think the date actually varies based on the factions you will be choosing. So you have large, vast selection of different factions that you can play from this time period, such as Rome, such as Carthage, and then you have like Athens, you have the Spartans, you have a lot of Gauls like Arvini, and then you have like the UK where you can play with Iceni. You can play with Persia, and actually I'm not sure about Persia. I think you can play with Persia, but essentially there's Egypt, and there's many factions out there that you can play with. Some of them are behind actual DLC, but you know, that's a problem of its own. You can probably find some pretty good deals from G2A or somewhere to get the DLCs for a low price, depending on like which race you want to play. I don't agree with everything on the DLC packages. Some are like the blood element is behind a pay-to-play, and this should have been included with the real game itself. But you know, that's what it is. As for like new features compared to the previous games, you have the Twitch TV integration, touchscreens controls, and Mac compatibility. And the Emperor edition is pretty much like that in like nutshell. So it's, you can't actually play anymore. You can't buy anymore in terms of, you know, hours. I think it takes around 50 plus hours to actually complete the Grand Campaign, depending on difficulty and how much real fights you will be fighting. and or will you be like putting the outer assault to its work? But there are some key good things about the game that I like, and there are a lot of bad things that I don't like about the game. So let's go about those a bit. So one of the bad things is the AI has been historically always dog shit in Total War games. The units are not very responsive. I mean, you use practically a settlement of characters. You're not expected them to like jump or immediately to this direction, but sometimes they just don't take any type of orders and they don't respond to your clicks very fluently. I'm not sure is this like a design choice, but it's sometimes really frustrating that they're not doing anything you want. In terms of like real strategy, there isn't like that much of like microing. You will be changing certain stances of the enemies, like let's say some like pikemen with shields can go into different type of like formation, which will be good against horsemen, but perhaps will be slowing their movement speed. The actual strategy in this game is like much less like out there compared to like Age of Empires 2 or StarCraft 2. It's not like there's not many things you can do. Then there you have the general unit like in other games. In Rome 2 compared to like Medieval 2, for example, there's much more abilities with the generals, and the generals are kind of more useful in that sense. And the settlements have all these kind of like cool cannons and like, you know, siege weapons that you can use, which is really cool. I really like the sieging part. I usually play the siege maps. I particularly like defending a lot. But that's kind of like the time, you know, the real battle is not for probably everyone, but there is of course that like a fast and speed mode, which will make the like maps go through in 5 to 10 minutes, which is actually good if you don't want to have the time to play every match. But you know, it's out there. There's a lot of options for both type of things, whatever you want to go with. Aside from like the things, there are a lot of stupid, really bad AI, as I mentioned on the. I mean, sometimes you could actually glitch people, the enemies not doing anything on these defense maps because there's a timer. So it means after 40 minutes or 20 minutes or 60 minutes, depending on what you choose, the game will end. And after that 20 minutes, you could like. There was a lot of times when I was able to like kind of like make the enemies not move their characters, especially when they were coming with boats. Sometimes they just left on the coast, and they didn't move them to the actual capture point, and then you just put like a super rewind, and yeah, it's I mean, yeah, they would just wait until the timer would go on and it would win certain battles which you shouldn't have won if the AI wouldn't been broken. And then you have, of course, the good old diplomacy. There are a lot of, like in Medieval 2, you know, it's the same system. So the more money you have, more lenient people will be following your suggestions. As you progress throughout the game, though, your diplomatic relationships will go down with every faction. So you can't really make alliances in the late game. It will be much harder unless you have a lot of money. But the game's diplomacy is actually a really big part. Even if you play it on easy mode, you really don't want to piss off everybody, because then they will come at you and everybody attacks you and you will be dead early on. The early game is significantly the most hardest part in this game. Once you perhaps get like 10 to 15 settlements, it's really hard to fall down from there, and it will be just kind of matter of time until you win. So you will probably know at that stage where you will be like kind of winning the game. So it's all about that early game and getting those right decisions and right relationships and factions. So try to make a lot of peace treaties, a lot of defensive allies, and then you will be easily moving forward with that plan. But if you piss off everybody at the beginning, they will just crush you like a cockroach you are. And the diplomacy, you know, I don't like the system because, I mean, the whole diplomacy in the game, it could use some RNG on it, because because you can abuse certain aspects of it. So there are a lot of like loopholes in this game, and once you find them out, you can abuse them too easily, and the game will be going to be too easy for you, to be honest. But In Medieval 2, what I really liked that you had the lineage system, so you would marry all of your generals, and then they would have babies, and the babies would reach a certain age, and then they would become generals too. This system has been kind of removed ever since of Medieval 2, and I really liked that system. I thought it was really superior. In this one, you kind of recruit, as in the empires. It's a really bad system, to be honest, and the whole like ruler thing, and it has this sort of like house of, you know, nobles or whatever it's called, like the faction leaders. This system is the most boring and useless system they have ever implemented. I'm not sure does it still exist in Attila and Warhammer, but it's a really bad system compared to the old ones. And overall, I mean, Rome Total War 2, Rome 2 is a pretty good game. It offers you a lot of hours, but if you don't really mind the graphics, I would probably buy Medieval 2 still, because it's a much better game. The time period, the problem that I have with this game, that the reason why I like Medieval 2 is because it had certain time periods. As the game progressed to a certain time, there was stuff like, oh, the catapults were invented, or iron, or the guns were invented, or, you know, and a lot of things like the rise of Christianity and stuff like that. You had time periods when there would be happening something like globally, like slave riots, and the Mongols would came at one point. There is no significant events like this in Rome 2. There's no Jesus coming on BC 0. Jesus doesn't come, okay? There's no these type of events. I also think there's much less units, and some of the units are actually behind pay to play, so you have to actually buy the DLC to get access to certain units. I think also Rome as a faction has pretty much the best units. And in terms of like the upgrades and all that, I think it was much better and vast on Medieval 2, for example, and in Shogun 2, I got that feeling. But, you know, of me like talking about the game a million times, it's just a good game. Perhaps people who are looking only to play the actual, like the battlefields, it might not be very satisfying. If you really like the strategy elements of it, like controlling the map, controlling the taxes, controlling the settlements, building armors for these, and like controlling the populace, not like preventing riots and all that, it will be a good game for you. And then there's of course the other campaigns which are also behind the DLC. I will be doing a separate reviews out of those later on. But thanks for watching this review. Perhaps you liked it a lot and I made an impression to you, and you might consider checking out my other reviews, and maybe after that you will be even subscribing. Give it a likes up and all that shit, and I will see you guys next time. Cheers.